Hello, hello. What's up? What's up? It is a new day, it is a new week, and it's time to get social. My name is KaVonna, and welcome to the Introvert's Social Hour. Hello, hello. Welcome, welcome. This is the Introvert Social Hour. Today we are talking generational Zillenial. And yes, we're talking about it. We know some people are like Zillennials don't exist, but we have to talk about the weird in between of the millennial generation and the Gen Z generation, what those people who are in that weird in between are going through, what it's feeling like. And I'm one of them. As a 98 baby. I don't know if I'm feeling very Gen Z these days, but I also do connect with Gen Z in some ways and millennials in some. So we're going to talk about it today. I brought my co 98 friend, Nicole. Y'all know Nicole. We're bringing back Nicole. So welcome, Nicole. How you doing today?
Hi. Yeah, I feel you on the 98 thing where I'm learning about the actual cutoffs for generations. I was like, are you sure? Are you sure?
Right? The cutoff is kind of wild though, because what's funny is you get cut off and then they're like, yeah, you're part of that generation. You must connect to it 100%. And I'm like, first of all, the Gen Z cutoff happened like once you're 97, you're Gen Z. So like, I'm like, hey, I'm only like, I guess you wouldn't count 2 years because if I was born in 97, I'd be, I guess, a year off or something like that. But
Mhm.
that weird cutoff and just all of a sudden, like, oh, Gen Z does this, Gen Z does that. And I'm like, I actually don't understand some of the things that you're saying I'm supposed to understand. So I just think that's
Yeah,
interesting.
exactly.
Um, I do want a little random question. Can you share a pop culture moment or trend that makes you feel uniquely zillennial, that in between of um that millennial and Gen Z vibe? What would that be for you? And then I'll share mine.
Um, I feel like there are a lot of things, but the like specific pop culture moment that I thought of when you asked that is like, going to see all the Twilight movies in theaters, but being the youngest person there every single time. Because it was like my mom wanted to
Yeah.
go and all her mom friends wanted to go. And then just us like little kids were also brought along for some of those.
Yeah. Oh, I didn't even think about Twilight. I automatically think of like the Disney Channel era because I really do feel
Mm,
like we had the best one. Like we got to
yes.
live through it. And I think the difference between like millennial, we actually like the older millennials like in the 90s, we actually lived through the height of it from our young and aged into our teens.
Mhm.
Versus like people millennials, maybe they experience like the height of Disney Channel middle school into high school or something like that. We got to experience it full way. So going from like being able to experience like That's So Raven into High School Musical. So I was gonna say High School Musical was peak. Like yes, there are
Yeah.
people in high school who were vibing to it, but I like that was for us.
Yeah.
So
And then
that
you
would
go
be
to high
mine.
school and you're like, this isn't like High School Musical at all.
T. I was like, the choir isn't even vibing like this. Yeah, that was the vibe. Um, Oh man, yeah, no, that would be I would definitely say that, but Twilight's a good one too, especially because we were like tweens, tweens.
Yeah.
Was it
The
considered
book,
tweens?
the first movie came out in 2008, I believe.
Yeah.
So, like, it was aimed at teenagers, but like being like that's where the Zillennial comes in for me is like being younger than the demographic that movie was aimed at, but still like going to see all of them in theaters and like being really hype and like when the last movies were coming out, being like, what the heck? When they, for Ricky Dog part two, when they like changed some
Mhm.
things up, and you're like, "Ah,
I
they
could
pulled their
just think of Carlisle.
yeah.
His head, yeah.
Well, especially
Uh,
because also for Twilight, like having read all those, that was one of my earlier experiences where it was like I had read the books and then the movies came out after. So I had that experience of like comparing it to the book, whereas a lot of times we people have either already read the books because they read them when they were young and now stuff is coming out for them, or they see the like remakes of the movies and TV shows and stuff, and then they go back to the books.
yeah. Random note, because I had just heard about this. Apparently they're making a animation version of Twilight, an animated version of
What?
Twilight. Yeah.
I heard people talking about remaking those movies, and I was like, no, it's not been enough time. Leave them
Yeah.
alone.
I 100% agree. I remember that was the thing, and then yesterday I saw it going around on Twitter that that remake is actually going to be animated instead.
I mean,
So
I
yeah,
feel much more interested in an animated version because at least that's something new about it instead of just like remaking the same thing. And you will
yeah.
never recreate things like the iconic soundtrack because that was before it was so expensive to
Okay.
license music. So you had bangers all the way through.
Mhm.
And you can never do better than Robert Pattinson and Kristen Stewart for those two roles, in my opinion.
I agree.
And
I think everything was cast perfectly, including like
yeah.
Taylor Lautner,
Hmm.
from all the way to like Boo Boo Store and like yeah, everything was solid.
Yeah.
Um, Connecting to these generations, so just like breaking it down for peeps who don't know, listeners out there. So millennials is also something I figured out. So because millennials has always been millennials to me, I didn't know that millennials was their nickname because I was always wondering where did Gen Z come from, but millennials are Gen Y. Didn't know that.
Mm.
And so millennials are Gen Y, but they just got a cool nickname. And then which makes sense because like boomers, they're boomers, but obviously they're Gen X, I believe.
Hmm.
I think that's before that. So
Oh
millennials are
yeah.
1981 to 1996. And then Gen Z is 1997 into like 2010. I've seen a mixture of answers. I've seen 2010, 2012, and then one person was just like early 2010s. So it's somewhere around there. I'm pretty sure there's a crisp cut answer if I were to dig
Hmm.
deeper. And then Gen Alpha has started after that into the mid 2020s. So I've discovered my sister's Gen Alpha. And so I guess they're just starting down the letters of the Greek alphabet. So then
Yeah,
they'll
start
probably
over.
go Gen Beta, yeah, and stuff like that. But that's the cutoff. My question is, because we barely made the cut. We barely hit Gen Z there. How do you personally like resonate with both millennial and Gen Z? Because people say Zillennials don't exist, and I get it because they technically don't. When we say that, it's because it's a blend of those two because we don't 100% resonate. And I'll explain
Hmm.
why I specifically don't resonate with one or the two. But how do you resonate with both or not resonate with one or the other?
Hmm. Um, there are definitely like different aspects of either. I think being kind of I guess the oldest of the Gen Z crowd,
Mhm.
and especially because I feel like most people growing up, you're always looking at people older than you for like how to act. And so because people even slightly older than me are millennials, that was kind of my like blueprint of like how do you behave as an adult. So a lot of the things in millennial culture I kind of feel like I actually I think this kind of spans both of them is just like a general doomerism of kind of like thinking about how the environment is being affected by like technology and things choices that we as humanity have made, um things like being recognizing that the economy is not where it was when like my parents were young and things like that. So like I wrote down love avocado toast, can't afford a house. That's how I relate to millennials.
Yeah.
I also apparently like especially as Gen Z was kind of coming into the like young adulthood,
Mhm.
there were a lot more signifiers that were defined as like millennial versus Gen Z as the millennial stuff started being not cool, which I thought was really interesting. So things like middle parts not being cool or like skinny jeans not being cool. And then
Mhm.
what things came back around to be cool. And then things that used to be very not cool, like wide leg pants or like loose fitting jeans, those were mom jeans. Those weren't cool. Like
Yeah.
or they were like a cultural niche, like an extremely wide pant, like a Jinko jean, would be a niche, but it wouldn't be like generally cool. Whereas for Gen Z, they love the wide leg pants, and that I agree with. I think they're a lot more comfortable.
I was gonna
um,
say, yeah, I think I'm a
mhm.
wide leg pant girl myself.
Yeah, I feel like it gives you. I don't know. I like the freedom, the flowiness of it.
Yeah.
Um, and even it's kind of funny to see how certain things just kind of get renamed. Like leggings became like yoga pants and like those the like trade off of those sort of things where like a
Yeah.
boot cut yoga
Mhm.
pant is in fashion now, but not in the way that it was in fashion for younger millennials
Mhm.
and things like that. Also for Gen Z, I feel like I align a lot with the attitudes toward work and like how we don't get paid enough for how much we work and those sort of things. And whereas millennials are kind of seem to be a lot more like, well, that's how it is. We just gotta like find a way to survive it. A lot more Gen Z are like, why questioning that of like, why does it have to be this way? Why
Yeah.
can't we make the choices to change things to be a little bit better? Um, I also have doomerism on my Gen Z list but it's a different kind of doomerism, I feel like, between the two
Yeah.
generations.
I get what you're saying. I want to say, let me know if this is how your thought process is. So you explain like millennial doomerism. For Gen Z, do you think they're way more aware of like how bad the earth is at play? For example, I think for me, my perspective I look at is like, y'all really just don't care. Like everything's going
Well,
bad. And then I think about so then my decisions also impact um the state of the world. Like what I choose to
mhm,
continue to do or not continue to do because I'm like, y'all are messing it up and you don't care. So
yeah. Well, I do think that we experienced the shift between, the environment is on brink of collapse. We need to do everything we can, like reduce, reuse, recycle. Like you, the
oh yeah.
individual, have a lot of responsibility for like improving the planet. Whereas we've seen a shift in the last couple of years where it's like to a certain degree, it doesn't matter what the individual does because corporations are still going to be doing the same things they've been doing, and they have a much greater impact than
Hmm.
even a large portion of individuals making different choices. So I think that shift of just kind of like it almost seems like it really quickly shifted to like there's nothing we can do. There's no what is it? There's no ethical consumption under capitalism became like a really
Hmm.
common thing that people say. And I think it kind of for a lot of people gave them permission almost to be like, well, what are you gonna do? And just kind of give up. Whereas it definitely seems like most millennials that I know still kind of feel that personal responsibility aspect to it. And it may just be that like a lot of Gen Zs are still like pretty young adults, so they
Exactly.
don't feel like they have the ability to make some of those choices and things like that. Like a lot of people are still just starting their careers in the older, like Gen Z generation. So you don't have the financial comfortability to like make sure you're buying all organic or making responsible choices because you can
Hmm.
afford it because it's always more expensive.
Yeah.
So I think that is a pretty big shift. And I see myself straddling both of those opinions a lot of the time.
I agree. Yeah. I think it's hard. It's hard. It's a hard in between because you want to like do your part, but then at a certain mix, it's like, well, dang, is my part even doing anything? And
Mm-hmm.
then you start seeing like the way they do like the CO2 emissions and things like that for one person who takes a private jet for,
Yeah.
1,000 miles or like a city away or something like that. So I don't know. Um, I would say for me, I agree with those that you said. I think back to like the first thing I always go back to is like I experienced Blockbuster. Like I had
Yes.
I had VHS tapes and I had a VCR, I had a
Hmm.
Walkman, like all those things that younger Gen Z cannot relate to.
Yeah.
That I relate to more connected with millennials.
Or the portable CD player with your wired headphones.
Oh, what did you call them? Because I call them Walkmans. What do you call them? You just
Oh,
call them
well,
like portable.
for me, Walkman makes me think of like a tape player like that
Oh,
because of my
okay.
parents. Because that's another thing that I think affects my like Zillenial identity is that my parents were just a little bit older than a lot of my peers' parents. So
Hmm.
my cultural connections from what I was taught from my parents
Hmm.
is a little bit more millennial just because my parents are a little bit older. So if they had had kids when like in the early 20s when a lot of people do,
Hmm.
then we would have been proper millennials, just like younger millennials.
Yeah.
So
See,
yeah,
so
I think
maybe
of
you are a
Walkman as
millennial
like
at
a
heart.
yeah. Even
But
things like wired headphones. Like, do you remember when the iPods, the ads were a silhouette of somebody with wired headphones and their,
hmm
music player?
Homegirl was dancing. Yeah. I used to
Yeah.
get iTunes gift cards. I used to eat those
Oh my
up.
gosh. Yeah.
But that's when I can understand where that kind of moves me away from millennial just a bit because I remember experiencing that a bit younger. But then Gen
Hmm.
Z cannot relate to that though. Younger Gen Z cannot. They'd be like an
Hmm.
iTunes gift card. Why didn't you just buy it online? No, I used to ask for iTunes gift cards for my birthday for Christmas so I could download music
Yeah. Even
and
the
buy music.
things like burning CDs,
Oh yes, I was doing that
like
too.
making mixtapes that were tapes, they were CDs.
Yeah. I remember I used to, it was in elementary school. I didn't have a laptop till later. So my friend would
Mhm.
be like, "Oh yeah, I made this CD." And I remember I asked her one time, and I still have it because it ate down. I was like, can I get like um a CD? Can you bring me a CD?" She was like, "Yeah, what kind of songs do you want?" And I was like, "Well, can I have some like Demi Lovato?" Like some
Ah!
Selena Gomez. So I still have that CD. It's so funny. Um and yeah, she brought me a CD and wrote. She'd write down in Sharpie what the playlist was, the order of the songs, and
Amazing.
see, they can't relate. That's so true. But then once again, we were in CD era versus like the cassette tapes. Were more.
Hmm.
But to be fair though, I remember when I was really young, like early elementary school, my school was still kind of technically catching up.
Hmm.
Um, in my after school program, they had cassette tapes you put in the player and no kidding, it'd be Britney Spears, Hit Me Baby One More Time. Like, just be like, ooh, choose a song, put it in the thing, and just sit there and listen to music. Like, that is
Hmm.
so crazy. So,
Yeah.
like, that's why I'm like, I don't know. I connect a lot with millennials, in experiences of what showed the time in technology, I would say.
Hmm.
I think that's the biggest takeaway for me that I think that's not considered is we had such a drastic jump in
Hmm.
time through technology of cassette to CD to now we're digital, or even going
Hmm.
from we got an MP3 player. I still have my little mini one. It doesn't work as good anymore, but I refuse to give it away. But I have a mini MP3 player to mini iPod mini to
Uh-huh.
iPod Touch
Or
to
even the original, one of the original iPod Nanos that was basically a USB stick with a headphone jack.
yeah. I used to eat those up though. I used to want one so bad. And then by the time I actually got one, it was iPod Touch. So I think I
Hmm.
got that in middle school. But I remember I used to want like the little a little hot pink iPod mini
Oh
just to walk
yeah.
around with my headphones in. Or the one with it still had a screen, but
Hmm.
I think it was just a regular iPod before we
With the
transitioned to
wheel.
iPod Touch. Yes,
Yeah, when
Yeah,
buttons were buttons and it wasn't all touch screen everything.
exactly.
Hmm.
Um, so I would definitely say that in connection with Gen Z though, like I said, I agree with you in the sense that I'm way more I'm not even for the people. I don't know if the right word is that, but like it's just like I question things. And I think that's
Hmm.
what Gen Z does very well. And even younger millennials too, I've noticed
Hmm.
that. So I think that's once again we see that blending happening. But I think a lot of like the older generation didn't question a lot, specifically like government wise, what was happening in the world. And I
Hmm.
think while it feels like we can't do much these days, we do question it though. It's like, that doesn't make sense. Hold
Yeah.
up. Well, COVID's happening. Where's our paycheck? We get where's our stimmy? Things like that. Like we need, like, we acknowledge that we're not in the best of scenarios. What 9 to 5? What is this? We telling me you got to
Yeah.
work Monday through Friday with only 2 days off, and then we got to do stuff on the weekends to make sure we're ready for Monday. So just things
Yeah.
like that. I think that I've seen a lot that we think about. Um, I do well with keeping up with lingo most of the time, Gen Z
Hmm.
lingo, I would say. And I think that might help just because I teach kids.
Hmm.
But I'm also like online sometimes too much. And I think so I think that helps as well. Um,
Well, I think that's a strong like showcase of the shift is that like as your community becomes a lot bigger when it's the entire internet. So I feel like I had to do a lot of like I don't almost be a linguistic chameleon where you have to kind of like feel out what other like how other people speak in different settings and things like that, and that can be as different as like what app you're on or who the demographic of those apps are,
yeah,
and that could be a really big difference between like how you interact with those platforms and things like that. So again, technology, but like linguistics and technology of like how you have to code switch every time you change what platform you're using.
that's so true though. Because like Twitter is very different from Instagram, and Facebook is
Yeah.
drastically different from the other two. It's funny because people always joke that Facebook gets like the news like 10 days later than Instagram or Twitter does. I would say Twitter is the first to get
Yeah.
anything. Um,
And
like,
even then we've seen changes in recent history of like how people interact with those things. Like another thing that I think is kind of that like late millennial experience is going from visiting a bunch of websites to having six apps that everybody uses. And then when one of them goes down, like Twitter having its really strong falling off, and like there's still people that use it, but the user base is very different now than what it was even 3, 4 years ago
Yeah.
because of like change in leadership and stuff like that. So, and then there's all those Twitter clones that came out because they're like, well, we want essentially Twitter, but different Twitter. And so now
Mm-hmm.
that group that it used to be really universal, like you could find reputable news on Twitter, whereas now you kind of have to be a little bit more skeptical and things like that because of changes to those platforms, even in the last couple of years that we've been using it.
Yeah, yeah, that's so true. I think it's so fun. Like I will never call it X. It's still Twitter to me in
No.
my eyes, but it's so funny though, because I don't think anybody calls it X.
Yeah, if anything, it's X formerly known as Twitter.
Right, yeah. Um, as far as like we talked a little bit about this, but what other cultural influences like music, movies, or like even fashion play a
Mm,
significant role in shaping like Zillennial identity. So you talked about how pants we go from because skinny jeans were it. Like you couldn't have
yeah.
told me 10 years down the line that skinny jeans were hard to find now and they weren't really much of a thing. Like, because I remember I would get so annoyed because I don't like tight clothing all the time.
Hmm.
So there was a point where all I could find were skinny jeans and I just wanted loose pants. And I was getting frustrated because I was like, I just want a regular pair of jeans and all I see is skinny jeans. And I'm getting
Yeah.
frustrated. Um,
And it was
so we had that. Yeah, go ahead.
and it was a huge part of the like hyper skinniness was such a part of the culture in the 2000s that like
Mm,
and it was really toxic. So I'm glad that we've kind of moved away from that, from like everybody needs to be a size 0 or a size 00 to like be
mhm.
acceptable and beautiful because I was never going to be that person. So trying to wear
Same
skinny jeans
here.
or even trying to wear like Converse were really big and like those never fit my foot type. So I was like, well, I guess I'm
Mhm.
just gonna forever be uncool. Thanks. Because
Yeah.
they were really like made for the body type ideal, which is another shift that we've seen like in our growing up that I think is really positive. That
Mhm.
there's not that like you have to look a certain way. Because even you see like old news stories of like pictures of a female celebrity and like everybody was calling her fat and it's like
Mhm.
what? You look at it now, it's like, no, that's a pretty thin young woman who, even by our standards today, it's like that's a thin woman. Whereas back then they
Yeah.
were like, you can't see her ribs.
Mhm. That's so
Chonky.
true. I think back to this one episode of Sister Sister I had watched,
Mm-hmm.
and they had talked about how, oh my gosh, my butt looks big, and it was like a bad thing. And it's
Yeah.
so interesting because that was like 90s, early 2000s at best. I don't think it was a later episode. I think it was more earlier. So
Mm-hmm.
it had to be 90s. And that transition from big butt's no good to you want a big butt is so
Exactly.
interesting. And then like you said, you go from that during that time of like, oh, skinny jeans, you want like this thin frame. That was also a time when people were talking about thigh gaps. Or
Mm-hmm.
I remember that was a big thing. But the transition is so interesting because that's also something that moves pretty quickly is what's okay in fashion and looks.
Mm-hmm.
Eyebrows. At one point you want thin eyebrows, really
Oh
thin, crisp.
yeah.
And then all of a sudden you want them bushier, filled in.
And then
And
there
that's
was
so
that
interesting.
minor surge where thin eyebrows were coming back in, and all the millennials were like, hey, don't pluck your eyebrows within an inch of your life because they will never grow back the same.
Exactly.
So, paying it forward from the suffering of the past, I appreciate it.
Yeah, it's like take it from us. No, but I remember that was a recent thing too because not like still recent within time because I remember when Zendaya got in the scene and her eyebrow like she's still being young. Her eyebrows are
Mhm,
pretty thick in terms
mhm.
of what we were seeing at that time when she was coming up on the scene as a fashionista. And I'd be like, yes, because I have thick eyebrows myself. So I was like, yes, make thick eyebrows look good. Your eyebrows don't need to be thin. And so I just thought
Yeah,
that was cool. And then now like nobody's even like pressing on eyebrows other than the fact that they're like, oh, fill them in or something like that.
yeah.
Um, what's another one? Like crop
I
tops are always in and out.
mhm.
I would
I was
say they
thinking
have
of
a
like
resurgence.
the hilarious Disney Channel period where like the almost upside down layering where like you would have like a really long underlayer because they still wanted to have things that were in fashion but keep it modest. So it would be like
Mhm.
a crop top and a tank top on top of a long sleeve shirt with
A
like a
cardigan.
with like a layered skirt and then jeans underneath or like
Mhm.
leggings underneath and three belts that weren't doing anything and like scarves and like over
Yes.
accessorized. It was quite the moment.
It's so
Maximalism at its finest.
it's hilarious though, because that was also the time though. I don't know if you ever had one, but the sleeveless cardigans,
Oh
like
yes.
yeah, that I had like one or two. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So I
And
like
also,
you would catch that a lot on Disney Channel.
yeah, sleeveless sleeveless cardigans and like yeah, this the ridiculous layering that they would do for
Mhm.
like to try and balance the like fashion of the moment with some modesty of like Disney Channel being for kids and especially for a bit younger kids than like
Mhm.
you know fashionistas maybe were hitting. So
Yeah.
very interesting.
Yeah.
Uh,
But I'm glad you mentioned the belts too, because like there are a lot of times when you look at pictures and it's like, why were they wearing that belt? And a lot of times it was just like, once again, for fashion. So it wasn't holding anything up. It was just to be there, to have something. But a lot of the times, like, it's a really big belt just for no
mhm,
reason. And I thought that was funny too. That was a thing specifically in the 2000s. I would say
yeah.
like later 2000s. Yeah.
Yeah, and there were a lot of accessory moments that were like kind of ridiculous. Like I think of very much that like 2000s era um when we were growing up as like we were cringe but we were free, like I feel like people these days are a
Mhm.
lot more aware of like especially because of the widespread use of the internet and because things are so much like visual first.
Mhm.
People really feel like they have to be very put together and people don't take as many like fashion risks as they used to, I feel like. Well, they I don't
Yeah.
even know if they would have been considered risks back then because some of them were in fashion. So it's
Yeah.
interesting how we can look back on something a period not that long ago and be like, oh, that's so cringe. Whereas like everybody was just kind of doing whatever.
They were vibing. Yeah. I think that's possibly a reason why I'm so comfortable now, just like kind of wear whenever I want. Like, I
Hmm.
don't think, in a way, I don't like it was in fashion, yes, but it also just didn't make sense, like you said. So then, in a way, were they also still kind of like taking those risks? I feel like
Hmm.
yes, because for me, I remember I would just kind of wear whatever I was like vibing with, not necessarily to be in fashion. If I wanted to wear skinny jeans, it was because I wanted to wear skinny jeans. Um, but that, like I said, for a time period, all I had was skinny jeans in my closet. I think I got more out of it when I could find other pairs of jeans again. And then that was more like college. I was able to like, okay, ooh, I like a wide leg pant, or like I always
Hmm.
liked the idea. They call them like mom jeans or boyfriend jeans or whatever.
Yeah.
I always liked the idea of that, like fold up the cut, like cuff the bottoms.
Hmm.
Um, I was a Converse person. But once again, same thing though. I discovered I was like, they're made for like slim foot people, and I do
Hmm.
happen to have a wider foot. So after a while I was like, I actually don't like the way my feet look in Converse. So then I became
Yeah.
more of a Vans person.
Hmm.
um Crocs, can we talk about how they went from being the most uncool shoe ever, like ew, why would you wear those, to like something
Yeah, their
that's being
fashion
worn
statement
all the
now.
time? Yeah.
It's wild.
Mm-hmm. It
Well,
is it. Yeah.
I do think that there's a really strong resurgence in like nostalgia as a valued commodity, whereas it didn't used to be that way. Like it's interesting because there's a lot of things that are like we cringe at stuff from the past, but because there's this surge in like desire for nostalgia, whether it's for a simpler time or just for a different time in the past, because it's easier to look back and think that everything was a lot simpler. There's a lot of those things that like were uncool or normally would be considered uncool in this like cultural climate, but because of the nostalgia factor, have a moment, and whether it's a brief moment or not, like they still get like I don't know. I feel like the fashion cycle being 30 years has changed a lot because there's a lot of times when like something will come up and be really in vogue for a very short amount of time and then go away.
Mm-hmm. That's true too. But it's also interesting because when you really think about it, we don't guide the fashion existence. Like I think
Mm-hmm.
it's about what's available. So like skinny jeans became
Yeah.
a thing they have skinny jeans in the store, you can't really have anything else.
Hmm.
So like I can't, oh my gosh, my brain's thinking. I just remember this idea. I can't remember what it was though. I remember there was a point in time where I was looking for something that no longer exists in the fashion world.
Hmm.
And I want to say it was a type of like shirt or jacket or something. If it comes to me, I'll go back to it, but I can't find it because it no longer exists. Like
Hmm.
for example, this is just like an example, like if you're looking for like a jean overall dress,
Oh
like
yeah.
if you're look, I think that's exactly what it was. Like it was something, you have to wait for it to kind of make a resurgence into the fashion world of it all, or hope
Hmm.
that you find it at a thrift store,
Yeah.
you
I
know?
remember there's a time when it felt like it was impossible to find jeans sold new that didn't have holes in them. And I never liked holes in my jeans,
Yes.
even when they were like the height of fashion, because I was like, you get less jean. I don't care if it's in fashion. Wear your normal jeans for long enough that they have holes, and then you'll be naturally in fashion. But yeah,
Hmm.
so there's a period of time where it'd be like, oh, this looks cute from the back, and you pull it out, and you're like, nope, covered in holes. And like,
That's true
just
too. I don't know why I forgot about that, but that was also a period of time. I think for me that was like middle schoolish.
Mhm.
But even for me, like if I didn't really go for like the big rips. If I did have rips, they were very small.
Mhm.
Um, my mom didn't play about that anyways, but it was just like, because like some of them got really extensive. Like
Yeah,
there was a
and
point like you
you
didn't
couldn't
have any
really
form of
wash
comfort.
them or they would be more damaged. Like I had a
Hmm.
friend who their favorite pair of jeans like had rips all down the front, and before the school year was over, it was just like basically a giant hole. Like they had shorts with like decorative the back of their jeans because the entire front
Hmm.
was torn open because everything that was like kind of connected when they were new had
Hmm.
frayed and come apart. So
Just let them go.
yeah, it was like cuffs
Oh,
and shorts and then like a little strip in between on the back. So it didn't really
oh,
do anything for her.
oh. That's hilarious. Oh, I forgot about that though. They still exist now, not as bad though, because they're like you said, there's a
Hmm.
point where like almost all pairs of pants, like a lot of them, were like ripped up.
Hmm.
That's so interesting. What do you think about like movies of our time? Like I talked about High School Musical, you talked about Twilight. I want to say now here's where I get disconnected a little bit.
Hmm.
The era of 2000s was rom-com central,
Hmm.
but I was so young that I didn't experience it in time. I experienced later on, like 2010, like 2010s ish, like early 2010s was when I got old
Hmm.
enough to like watch movies and enjoy them and like understand it. Like, I remember I watched The Proposal, like, might I add, also technology opener on a box TV, not a flat screen,
Oh my
a big
gosh.
old box TV, that sat on the floor because it was so heavy. And I remember that was when I experienced The Proposal. And once again though, I that was like in the later time of rom-com central.
Hmm.
But once again though, I didn't experience the whole entire scenery in its time. So that might be a little bit more millennial connected
Hmm.
in a sense where I'm like a little bit apart from that and then maybe a little bit more connected with Gen Z. But at the same time, at that point, and Gen Z hadn't even been born yet.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's
And
hard.
I connect with that a lot with the like box TV with the VHS tapes. And that's why I didn't watch a lot of new movies that were coming out in that like early period because we had the VHSs that we had on tape and occasionally we would go to Blockbuster, and then when Blockbuster was kind of falling off, we started doing the like Netflix DVD
Like
by
DVD.
mail thing
Hmm.
by mail, which is
Right.
also crazy to look back on.
Hmm.
Um, so I didn't watch a lot of new stuff, but there are so many things that are super specific to my family that like we were obsessed with because that was what we had on tape. Like my sister has probably seen Cinderella, The Little Mermaid, like a lot of those early Disney movies
Hmm.
millions of times just because that was what we had and it just was on repeat on cycle.
Hmm.
We had my mom was a big fan of the Donnie and Marie show, which is just like this old like variety show where they would perform music and like do comedy bits and stuff like that. We had two tapes of that. So I watched those so many times as a kid growing
Hmm.
up. And there's like really specific cultural moments that became very central to our family just because that was what we had, and we didn't really go out to the movies when movies were new. Um,
Mhm.
we would have to wait until it came out on tape or it came out on DVD.
Yeah, that's true too. Oh, especially because cable for us was like off and on. So there were
Mhm.
times where I would, but I can't even think of certain movies because at a certain point I got so tired of them that I don't even watch them anymore. But
Yeah.
there's this one with I can't remember. It was with Zoe Saldana, Ashton Kutcher, and Bernie Mac. And I can't think. It's not Get Out. It's like I can't think of the name, but basically, Ashton Kutcher is marrying Zoe Saldana, who in the movie is Bernie Mac's daughter,
Mhm.
and they don't like each other though, or he doesn't like Ashton Kutcher, and it's a whole thing. I remember that movie was on play all the time because that's what we had in our like collection of stuff. It was that. Um I had oh my gosh, what was that the one? The reason why I know 525,600 minutes,
Oh,
that song
yeah.
specifically, because I remember it was a trailer in that DVD, like coming soon
Oh,
on DVD. And they
yes.
would play it. And that's all I knew. I was like, I don't know anything about this musical or anything. I didn't even think of the idea of a musical yet. It's just
Mhm.
like they're singing. Okay, gonna try to like press the button so I could try to skip and
Yeah.
fast forward to get to the actual movie part. Had to press play on,
Yep.
the remote to get it. It's just so like the times. Oh, Major
Or
Pain
like,
was one too. If you ever watched
mm,
that with Damon Wayans. Yeah.
yeah, I had that experience with like the Mean Girls DVD. There's like the few commercials that were on before the movie played, and it was just like the same things over and over again because we rewatched that so many times. And additionally, for Disney movies, Disney Fast Play, where you have to like rush to find the remote to like
Mhm.
skip the fast play, so it wouldn't do the it would because it would
The
be
whole
like
thing.
15 seconds that you had to go find it,
Hmm.
and it was quite the event in our family because you're like sitting in to watch a movie and then you're like, oh no. Or
Yeah.
even things like with cable, going to commercial and like you have a period of time where you got to get your snacks, you got to go use the bathroom, you got to do whatever you have to do
Hmm.
while before the show comes
The show
back.
or movie come back on. Hmm.
Mm-hmm.
I'll never forget. But it's so funny though, because people have to remind, like, we have really lived through like such a fast jump of technology. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I truly, like, how do we go from VHSs to CDs, DVDs to come, like, okay, we got our cable running to go catch a snack or a bathroom break for a commercial, so we can pause it whenever we want. Like, it's just so interesting.
Yeah.
That's so true. Though. I remember like, oh, High School Musical is an event. High School Musical 2, an event. Because now we knew what we were coming in for. So I couldn't miss
Mm-hmm.
anything. I got to know what's happening with Gabriella and Troy. I remember when I first watched it, I've told you all this before. I cried when Gabriella and Troy broke up. It hit
uh,
commercial, zoomed. What do I need to do to go get some snacks, use the bathroom? Okay, come back. Um, but wow, what a time. I'm just
yeah.
like sitting here thinking like, wow, we really did like go through so much. I remember having a boom box, like an actual
Oh
boom
my
box.
gosh.
You
Yeah,
don't
my
find
CD
those
player was
anymore.
like, do you want to know something crazy? You know how
Hmm.
vinyls have kind of come back and like people have like their vinyl player in their collection of vinyls?
Yeah.
I found on the internet a like bespoke fancy CD player that is in that
Oh.
style. And I was like, don't make me feel old. Just
Oh.
it's like, and I'm tempted to buy it because I haven't
Mhm.
had a CD player in so long. But in my recent move, my roommate and their mom found a bunch of old CDs and stuff like that from like, oh
Mm.
god, the emo music of the 2000s and stuff like that, like the
Yeah.
Evanescence, the blue and black
Yeah.
CD and all that. Just there's so many things that like you listen to a whole CD because that's what you had. Like the
Mm.
amount of times I wore out Taylor Swift's Fearless because that was one of the few CDs I had,
Same.
or the first uh musical that I went to go see in person, American Idiot, because of course,
Mhm.
because I was obsessed with Green Day, and my friend's dad who took us was like, "Oh, I'll get you something from the gift shop," and I was like, "I don't want like a T-shirt or anything. I just want the CD." And I listened
Oh,
to that CD because so many times because I was like, I
yeah.
need the music.
That's so true though, because things weren't so easily accessible. Like,
Hmm.
if I'm vibing right now, I'm like, ooh, I'm gonna listen to this. I could just go and search it up and press play. And a few different platforms actually too. Like I don't have to have Spotify necessarily. It could be available via just YouTube, if I want
Yeah.
to play a playlist or something. Um, that's true though. I also have, in regards to music, I feel like that's connected to Zillennial times when we were able to actually like get CDs and stuff like that. Um, I also have Taylor Swift's Fearless.
Yes.
And I still have it because now I've gotten older. I'm a big believer in just like keeping your stuff. Um,
Mhm.
because I remember when my mom was getting rid of the VHSs, I was like, dang, like got rid of the VCR. We don't have any of that stuff anymore, and I kind of wish we
Yeah.
still did. Um, so I still have my CDs and DVDs. I had Selena Gomez's A Year Without Rain. I have High School Musical, all three of them.
Oh
I
my
have all
gosh.
three, and I have the first one karaoke version. Play that down. I don't even know if it still works, but play that down on my boombox. So it was a two CD disc, and it came with the lyrics. You open it. So I
Oh
had.
yeah, the booklets that would come with the CDs that had all the lyrics
hmm
in it. That's amazing.
Seriously, yeah. So the Taylor Swift one does, the Selena Gomez one, and here's how much of a Disney fan I was. Emily Osment from Hannah Montana dropped an album, and no one
I
knows it.
remember that.
I have the CD, played it down with the lyrics on it, printed. So
Mhm.
I would say that would be our time period. That was really central to us. Not even
Mhm.
not 100% even millennials, because at the point they were older at that time, where who like
Yeah.
if they were getting CDs, they probably weren't getting Disney Channel CDs at that point.
Mhm.
Um, and then Gen Z wasn't really, like young Gen Z or yeah, younger Gen Z wasn't old enough to really,
Yeah. And there
vibe.
was also that transition time where like I don't know if you did this,
Mhm.
but before like right before they started like really cracking down on piracy and stuff like that, like internet piracy, the YouTube to MP3 era where you would like find a lyric video or even
Mhm.
like because there were a lot of like YouTubers that were like making new music and stuff like that.
Yeah.
It would be like there that would be the only way that you could have it to listen is to download it and put it
Mhm.
like as a MP3 file onto your music player. So
Yeah.
like that era, and it was also like the CD ripping era, CD burning era, where like, and then things went into streaming, and now like it's a lot like again, kind of like with movies as well, where things became a lot more expensive to license. They're
Mhm.
a lot more protective of like piracy and stuff like that because they're like, we're actually losing money. Give us our money.
Mhm. Yeah. I did. That's how my MP3 has music on it. But if you're listening, I didn't. That's
I did
what
not.
I didn't.
I don't
I don't know
even
what
know
that
how to
is.
pirate.
Don't even know how music got there. What's a pirate? Um,
Yar.
Yar.
You
Yeah,
mean like
literally, I was gonna
Pirates of
say
the
Yar. That's what
You'd be
I
like
didn't
Pirates of
do
the
it. I didn't want to
Caribbean?
be cringe. Yeah,
Hey, listen.
we were on the same plane though, so yeah.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, I have what music do I have on there? I was in the Hunter Hayes era. I
Mhm.
was. I'm not a huge country girl, but he got me. I liked his music at that time. Like Wanted. He was Wanted. Was it Out Love? I can't remember the other one, but yeah, Hunter Hayes, Eight Down. Um, I got some of the script on there. Love the
Yes.
script. Once again, probably still had some Demisha Lovato on there. It's right here. It's so funny. I literally don't get rid of it. I sometimes come back to it. Music quality is trash, by the way.
Of course.
Of course. But look at it. It's a Sansa MP3 player.
Oh my
And
gosh.
at some point, I don't know what happened. It had a back where you could clip it onto your jeans pocket. Yeah.
That's so cute.
And so I don't even know. I remember I charged it not too long ago just to listen. Yeah, look it comes on. So for people,
Wow.
the screen is like a little mini screen, and then you could see the songs. What does that say? Oh,
Wow. And it
battery
has the
low.
class the classic wheel on there.
Yeah, it has a classic wheel. You could play,
Has a
skip.
headphone jack.
It has a headphone jack, a USB for a proper downloading.
Wow.
So yeah. Um, but once again, I think MP3 was our era
Yeah.
specifically. I want to say I think MP3 was our era. Um, I had that blend having that Walkman a little bit. I had a Walkman at a young age, but I'm pretty sure people in high school who the old like those millennials were like all about like Walkman CD players. I remember mine was white and blue, and it had flowers on top. So that's where Taylor Swift was
Ah.
getting bopped. That's where Selena Gomez
Hmm.
was getting bopped, the High School Musical, and it was big. So don't even ask me where I think I just remember holding it, to be honest, walking around because it couldn't fit in your pocket.
Hmm.
That's the
Do
funny
you remember?
part.
Do you remember the era when backpacks had holes for headphone jacks so you could put your wired headphones into your
Mm-hmm.
backpack into your player that was in there
Yeah.
because it wasn't just in your pocket or whatever?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Jan Sport. I had a Jan Sport like that, I think. Um, man, what a time. I think yeah, technology really plays a part in those jumps. And I
Hmm.
know I keep saying that, but it really does. And it spans just not just because like music, movies, all that stuff, and then also like TVs,
Hmm.
accessibility to technology and things like
Hmm.
that. Um, how would you say, seeing how quickly we have advanced, how would you say that has impacted your view currently of like the world of technology today?
I think that both I it has made me very adaptable because I feel like I've had to eh, readjust to a lot of different eras of like technology. Like
Hmm.
I was just thinking about it the other day where like I experienced the shift from house phone landline to between the four me and my siblings there was one kid phone for emergencies that
Yeah,
my oldest sister would carry, and then like through I had I couldn't find it. I was looking for it in my move to
mhm.
try and show you, but like I had one of those BlackBerry type like
Yeah.
phones where you're
Mhm.
still first I started on the 9 dial where you're like you have to hit the save button 4 times to get one letter.
Yeah. Hmm.
Um and then to the like BlackBerry style little phone for texting. And it wasn't until I think early high school that I got my first smartphone, maybe mid high school even, because I think I still had that BlackBerry was the kind that like you drop it and the back comes off and the battery goes
The
flying and
battery
like whereas now like if you have a smartphone and you don't put a case on that like you're asking for
shatters.
trouble. You
Hmm.
drop that and it's over.
Hmm.
um
Yeah.
yeah, into like smartphones being super pervasive and things like that. Like I've had to adapt to a lot of different eras of that.
Hmm.
But at the same time I've also feel like we've seen a lot more like questionable technology things like we where like we talked about before like piracy and things like that, like a lot of access to music because it was just like people sharing stuff and like not necessarily doing the responsible thing and paying for it, but you know to things becoming a lot more protected. Like you can't like even things of you can't take a screenshot when you're watching Netflix because they don't want you to steal the
Have the
screenshot.
picture. Yeah.
Yeah, and like streaming and like the experience of like more recent times where like a show that is really well loved can be like just completely deleted from everything to save
Hmm.
the producers money,
Yeah.
and there weren't DVD sets of those things that there used to be for shows like that, so it's just gone. And even things like NFTs and Bitcoin having a really strong like impact on the environment, and
Hmm.
like generative AI stuff having a really strong impact on the environment just to run it. Like things that are really trying to be at the forefront of technology, but not necessarily doing it in a responsible way. So it's
Hmm.
like I'm kind of in the middle of like these things can be really interesting and exciting, but at the same time, like there's still, I feel like that, they spent the whole time thinking about whether they could, they never stopped to think if they should kind of thing, where it's like people want to
Hmm.
have the next technology new shiny thing and
Yeah.
everybody wants to get in on it to get their moment, but we're having a lot more like short term big bubble that bursts kind of thing, like we saw that with NFTs.
Hmm.
Bitcoin and like those sort of things have lasted a bit longer, but there were a lot of them at one point and a lot of them tanked. So
Yeah.
there's we've seen some the good and the bad of it, I feel like. So I'm both more skeptical of a lot of things and jaded as far as like, you know, there's not as much like free access to media and stuff like that. You can't like actually own things like you used to. You could
Hmm.
even, buy a movie on Amazon And because rights get exchanged somewhere, you no longer have access to it, even though you spent the $14 or whatever it is these days
Yeah.
to buy it.
I remember I found out about that and I was like, that's kind of frustrating. So that's why I
Yeah.
was like, yeah, no, I think I'm gonna stick to my DVDs. Now I'm not about to go off and buy like 5,000 DVDs right now, but I think if I want to own something, I think that's the next move.
Hmm.
Like I own Last Christmas. I love Last Christmas. I own that on Amazon because I remember one Christmas season I really went to watch it and it was available nowhere, which is
Hmm.
wild. And so I bought it on Amazon and I was like, I found out I was like, it could just disappear. That was actually within the
Yeah.
last year or so. But like actually, fun fact, if they decided they don't have ownership of it anymore, you could just not have it.
Yeah.
Um, so that's definitely the downfall of technology at times. Like as much as they have tried to grow so much, they've also fallen behind in certain ways or pushed us backwards,
Hmm.
in reverse. Um, I think there's only so much we can do at a certain amount of time. Once again, I think they're trying to grow so quickly, and I think there's just so much we only have access to at this point. Like, what
Yeah.
are those, the Apple,
Yeah.
what are those things called?
Glass? Is it Apple Glass?
The ones where people are seeing their their phone screen at the same time as walking in the real world.
Yeah.
Um, the fact that those came
The
out and people were
Vision.
actually,
The
thank
Vision
you, yes,
Pro.
Apple Vision Pro. Like, once again, though, elementary school me would have been like, oh, wow, that's a thing. But they had been, I feel like we've seen so many like ideas of that and,
Yeah.
at this point, fictional or realistic, where it came out just like, can't afford it anyways. But also, too, just like the realism of it, the realisticness of it all, of using it just doesn't make sense. But that's when I think, like, once again, there's only so much you could do. You have
Hmm.
Apple Vision Pro, which is very cute and all, but at the end of the day, not many people can afford it. What
Yeah.
is it really doing? How is it really benefiting people? So as much as they try to jump into the future of this idea of hoverboards and like the real hoverboards that people vision and like Back to the Future and things like
Hmm.
that, eventually you get halted because it just doesn't work. And I did want to
Hmm.
talk about like what that looks like societally right now of why those things don't
Mm.
work. So we talked about like a bit of career and like the world of Gen Z and how they look at career and stuff. We all talked about like not 100% economy, but also like the state of the world.
Hmm.
Um, what other things like societal and cultural norms you think come with being in between a millennial and Gen Z or even both? For me, I think of once again we talked about like I feel like at a certain point there's just what the heck are we gonna do? The world's kind of coming to a close. We just don't know when.
Hmm.
Um, and I think that's where I'm kind of in between of like a millennial where we talked about like I want to be able to do something, but everything feels so out of my hands because I see who's actually in control here, and my
Hmm.
eyes are very open to that. I see that, and that's where the Gen Z comes in. Like I'm fully aware of everything. I think we're very aware.
Hmm.
I saw a TikTok about that. She was like, "What's so annoying about being Gen Z is like we're 100% aware of everything happening." Like
And
she's
have
like
no power to
sometimes
do anything.
exactly. She was like sometimes I just want to be like the boomers and just live in the bliss and not know and not be frustrated. Um, I would say that's the biggest thing, seeing that
Hmm.
we have been put in a work structure that does not suit us, but suits the government, suits big companies,
Yeah.
things like that. How everything of, and it could be a time of right now also, because we have seen the world shift immensely in the past 5 years with COVID alone.
Hmm.
Um, but everything just right now seems to be shifting against us. So when it comes to like social, like cultural things, we tend to go to the media of it all. We
Hmm.
tend to put our grievances and our thoughts there. But I'm curious to see like what happens next.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, let's talk about it, though. Like, what are some social and cultural norms that we do see happening right now?
I definitely feel very in the middle on the like attitude towards work and jobs because again, like my parents being a little bit older really instilled in me that like strong work ethic thing and like, you want to be responsible, you want to be loyal to your company and
Yeah.
stuff like that. When that is so different from the like economic reality, the
Hmm.
fact like when my parents were my age, you if you worked at the same place for 15 or 20 years, like there were benefits to that. You got a pension, you got like actual raises that kept up with your lifestyle and like things weren't
Hmm.
generally so tight where like that would be fine. Whereas like these days, I feel like a lot of the career advice is like you need to be changing positions at least every 2 years because raises do not keep up with the cost of living.
Hmm.
And there aren't no such things as pensions anymore. Like you're lucky to get like a decent retirement plan. And then there's also the like doomerism of like by the time that I am ready to be pulling out from a retirement plan, is that still going to be viable? Is the
Exactly.
world going to be in a state where like that makes any difference to my life at all? You know,
Hmm.
especially when it's like so tied up in things like investing. Like I'm making a 40, 50 year bet and they keep raising
Hmm.
the retirement age. So like,
Hmm.
am I still going to be working when I'm 80 or 90? Still hoping for that retirement money that's going to be not what it was when my parents were my age.
Everyone's getting tomatoes. I'm throwing tomatoes
Yeah.
everywhere. I'm waiting for the day, like, this isn't real, but just for clarity, this is real, but I'm waiting for the day that there's an uprising somewhere. Like, we are, like, no, I heard about that. Homeschooling Biscuit was like, yeah, let's raise the retirement age. Like, everybody should be working until like 70. 70? When people die
Yeah.
before that? Like, are you kidding
Yeah.
me? Because they're
Especially when you work hard.
overworked.
Yeah. Like
I was just,
stress, and it's not that it's especially with like jobs where you don't get much outside time, don't get much physical
mhm,
activity. Like you have to spend time outside of work on physical upkeep for your health so you live long enough to retire. It's wild.
yeah. And I think I want to add on to that. I think that's where my perspective is completely Gen Z in the fact that what I see differently now is like my grandma, she's up for your job. You're going to take a dance class. Aren't you tired from work? Or, oh, you're going to do something over the weekend. Aren't you tired from work? Don't you want to rest? And it's like, I can't let, and it's something that she has to learn from me, but she doesn't also 100% get.
Hmm.
I cannot let a job that only is here to pay my bills. It's not even something right now that I am pursuing. It's not something I enjoy 100%,
Hmm.
100% of the time. Even if I did enjoy it though, it should not surround my life. And I
Yeah.
think that was something that was super that happened a lot. We've seen like and when we look at so we're saying we look at the 1900s and then we see like a lot of the people were surrounding their lives in their work. If they weren't
Hmm.
working, they were taking care of their kids, the traditional,
Yeah.
parental of it all. You should have kids, you should have a family. They were able to buy a home, things like
Hmm.
that. They were able to get a 99-cent burger from McDonald's, just things like that. And so for me, I'm big on no, my job does not reflect me. My job does not take over my life. I'm still going to do it. If that means I'm ending up a little extra tired, at least I could say I've enjoyed my time outside of my job. I'm all about enjoying my life. I'm not here
Hmm.
to work. I'm here to live. And if that means I need to work in order to do that for right now, that's fine. But at some point, we're about to work and get a job I actually want to do and
Yeah.
pays me well. Like I can't be out here fighting for my life. This is this is not it.
Yeah. Especially, I think for the two of us, like being really wanting a creative career and the complete lack of respect or like desire to fund people to genuinely have careers in art, like you end up having to always make a compromise for something that is not not where your passion lies. And few people are genuinely passionate about their day job, but there were
Yeah.
a lot of people that like really defined themselves on their career previously, and that has really fallen off because there is that the job has to work for you to be putting in so hard to work for the job, if that makes sense. Like, and I like that
Mm,
that attitude
I
is
agree.
shifting because like my parents' attitudes toward it, they're like, well, you just work a job that you hate for like 10 years and save up some money. It's like, no,
I
that's not
refuse.
really possible anymore.
You saw my reaction. I said I refuse. I can't, but that's a lot of how my older relatives in my family are. I know
Hmm.
someone, they make a great amount of money, hates their job, been
That's
working there for a
crazy.
long time. And it's like, it's because, hey, it makes some money. I got to take care of it. And in a way, I understand. And I do apply that in some ways. Like you have to play smart. I hate my job, but I
Hmm.
can't just quit it, you know? Like I know
Exactly.
I need to pay my bills. Um, I don't like my job and I know, for example, eventually they're going to pay me more. So when I leave and go to the next job, I need to be able to make that same amount of money instead of make
Mhm.
less. So I still that's where that millennial tie-in comes in. Like I still have to play smart, but I'm
Mhm.
not about to be out here struggling like this because also something to be aware of is that jobs will drop you like a hot tamale. We've seen that
Mhm.
a lot, especially corporate and tech companies.
Mhm.
But like my job has made it clear too. Like, oh, if our CEO says, "Oh, we don't like her, we want to get rid of her," we can't do anything. Like, you gone. They said that. And I was just like, well, I already knew, but thanks for the reminder that we're indispensable, even though you kind of need us, because you're
Yeah.
lucky that we are here, being a teacher. But um, I think that's why another thing too of why we start to see that teacher shortage. Connecting the dots a little bit. I saw
Mhm.
a thing that popped up. It's not a teacher shortage. It's the fact that y'all do not care enough about teachers and their life
Mhm.
work and their quality of work and their quality of living while they're a teacher, that
Yeah.
they're not teaching anymore. So at
Yeah. It's.
first it was like that. They were down to be there. I'm pretty sure the work hours were a lot different.
Mhm.
And now teachers are like, no, I'm out. It got worse. And I'm not about to be sitting here doing that.
And you can make more money as a server. Like
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
that aspect is wild to me that there are so many like professional level jobs. And it used to be that like the reason that people would work hard to get an education to go from a service job to, a corporate job or an office job
Mhm.
or more of a career like teaching is because it paid. Like they paid off in some way. And
Yeah.
we just don't see that as much anymore, which, you know, that's I feel the same way about the whole like people don't want to work these days. It's like people work because they need to, but they're
Yeah.
not about to put up with crazy, ridiculous, like ridiculous hours for not enough pay or like a
Hmm.
boss that is terrible. Like,
Yeah.
especially because it's like it's a struggle to like find a job that is decent, but if you absolutely need to, there are a lot of places that are hiring. So it's like
Mhm.
that trade-off of like, you know, the there I think there needs to be a shift in mindset for on the company side of like if you want loyal workforce, you have to make it worth it. Like you
Mhm.
have to proper you have to respect the work life balance. You have to, you know, give bonuses and raises and things that like are materially like significant to the point where people are like,
Mhm.
"Oh yeah, my job wants to take care of me."
Mhm.
Because the worker is the one that is providing the value. The managers and stuff like that,
Exactly.
that's all overhead. If you lost all your teachers, it doesn't matter if you have the best principal in the world. Like
Mhm.
because they're not going to be able to run an entire school with no teachers.
Mhm. Yeah.
So it's like remembering where the value comes from, I think is something that a lot of places really need to like get back to like actually have retention. Because
Mhm.
like I said, if it's more beneficial for the individual person to switch their job up every 2 years, you're never going to build in that like that expertise that used to be there, like people having genuinely long careers and like knowing how things work. Now turnover is so drastic because it's not worth it to stay. So then you don't have that institutional knowledge being passed down because you get like 3 days to train somebody and then the previous person's out. You only
Mhm.
hope that you've learned enough from them to really be able to do your job. And then you just have to figure it out from square one again.
Yeah. That's true. In connection with that, I'm gonna tie it in with my next question.
Mhm.
The first question though is, do you see that outlook changing as you start to see millennials and Gen Z take over those leadership roles in the future? Because I kind of see that a little bit now, but I can also sense that sometimes it doesn't mean it's necessarily Gen Z or millennial, just like whoever's taking that role, they understand it, it clicks for them. Because I've
Mhm.
seen certain small startup companies be like, hey, we're giving unlimited PTO. Obviously, no one's going to be off every day, but it's good to know that you're not structured, like you're not limited. I've actually seen research that shows that people who have unlimited PTO actually don't take off that much, which is funny, probably because they enjoy their job and take off when they
Well,
need to. But
there's
I don't.
additional like that can be sometimes that could be a detriment at the same time because a lot of places with
Mhm.
unlimited PTO still have a lot of limits to when and
Like
how you
blackout
can use
dates.
them. Like,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, blackout dates are a strong one, or you can't take more than 5 days consecutively and things like
Mm-hmm.
that. Like, you can have as many days as you want, but we're going to limit it to the point where you might as well not take it.
True. I didn't think about
Whereas, like,
that.
if
Yeah.
somebody knows that they have a bank of it, they're like, well, I have, for a school year, for example, they're like, well, there's 3 months to the end of the school year. I've got two PTO days left. I'm going to use them versus like
Mm-hmm.
somebody who has an unlimited bank. They're going to be like, well, I can't take time off right now because X, Y, Z. And I'd have to
Mm-hmm.
request it 3 months in advance and it would be a pain in the ass. So, whatever. So
Mm-hmm.
it can be a
Mm-hmm.
blessing and a curse.
True.
It still depends heavily on management and like
Yeah.
whether they're willing to really respect that like people deserve, like that's part of your compensation. If you don't use
Yeah.
it, you're losing out on pay that you're owed, essentially.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So do you see it changing in the future? Like how the workforce looks right now? Do you see maybe as not having this whole 9 to 5 schedule idea? Or do you think it's not even based off of a generation view? Is it just how it is in the US? What do you think?
I could see it going different ways. I think we're in a really precarious moment right now with like the economy and stuff like that. So a lot of
Hmm.
people are really like hesitant to make big changes and stuff like that. Like,
Yeah.
but I think because attitudes are shifting and people are willing to put up with less, there will have to at some point be some sort of reckoning of like, we need to figure something out because this is not viable for like most people.
Hmm. Do you think that it will be like sometime soon, or maybe it isn't a generational thing, or do you think maybe it would take some a millennial view to really start shaking the tables up?
That again, because there's such variation within various generations, I think that
Yeah.
as millennials fall into more of those like low level management positions, there is a higher chance of it because I think that there is a strong attitude among many millennials of like, as much as I'm gonna work hard and like do my best for work and like be dedicated, like still recognizing that like that sucks and wanting something more. And then you have the increasing workforce of Gen Z people who are demanding that things change because like they still have the dream of things being different. I think that it is possible that as that shift starts to increase, we might see the changes.
Okay.
But again,
No way
you
to
still have
tell.
like, and there's no way of telling like, your CEO might be like, no, you absolutely cannot do that because this is how we do things. And it may take
Hmm.
a long time for certain companies to come around
Yeah,
just based on tradition, which,
that's true. I thought about that as well. Yeah.
yeah.
Some people are really
I
stuck
think
in that tradition of it all.
Yeah, and I think there's also a really strong aspect to like boomers and things like that where it's like, well, I had to work hard. Why aren't you willing to work hard? So there's that like generational jealousy almost that you see a lot.
Hmm.
Like it's reproduced in almost every generation where like new
True.
technological advances are like, we didn't have that when we were your age. Like you see it as old as like tablets, like writing tablets in ancient times there were philosophers that were
Hmm.
like nobody's going to ever be able to remember anything if they just write it down all the time. Like
Hmm.
with every technology there's an old man that's going, you don't need that.
Hmm. Exactly. I did without it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, last question before we wrap up. How do you see the Gen Z, Zillennial, Millennial generations influencing and shaping the world in the future? What do you think's gonna go on?
I am very interested to see it because because I think a lot of us experience, at least in the US specifically, like, we saw the expansion of a lot of civil rights and things like that, and now we're starting to see some like backsliding on that.
Mm-hmm.
But we also are seeing that like the average age of people in power is a lot higher than the average age of like
Hmm.
Americans.
Yeah,
So my hope is that as those, because eventually that age is going to have to come down just because of the far outliers retiring or passing away. So like
exactly.
my hope is that because in general it's a younger generations seem to be more liberal than the ones that came before, especially on like civil things, because it's like things that are a lot more normalized to them. Whereas like an older person who is used to the idea that like queer people are strange, they don't deserve rights. A
Mhm.
younger person who is like, I grew up with gay marriage. I don't see what the problem is. Like it literally
Yeah.
doesn't affect my life. Being a lot more accepting of things like that.
Yeah.
And so my hope is that we will see future expansion of civil rights, and like especially as like young people have seen like the backsliding and like, hey, like you got rid of Roe versus Wade, like that's, and seeing the negative impact that it had on people. Whereas I think
Mhm.
when that was in debate and discussion, people weren't really aware of like, because it was like a given in their life, they weren't really
Mhm.
aware of like what it would affect. And
Yeah.
now that we're seeing the effect, it's like, oh no, we don't want that. Give it back. We don't, you know.
Hmm.
And but I do think we're seeing a lot more like divisive, like people are becoming a lot more divisive and divided on their certain ideas about things. So
Yeah.
it's interesting, and it's, I feel like it's going to be hard to see, but my hope is that we're going to see a lot more of expansion of civil rights, and more realistic views on like what work is, and the shift towards a like, you need to be a person and living your life, and your job is a means to that end. Doesn't mean you should absolutely phone in your job every day, because I think everybody's had that experience where like the customer service is not customer serving you because that person absolutely hates being there. So hopefully some sort of shift in like, one, how we treat people when it comes to work and expectations, and less demand on people to be like on all the time and like working
Hmm.
their hardest 40 hours a week to the point where you're too exhausted to do your job well. You just have to do it. Hopefully we'll start to see the benefits of those coming through, and then have that cultural shift of like, oh, it turns out when people are happier, things are better.
Exactly. Yeah. I think it's possible. Everything you said, I think is very possible. It could just be a US specific thing because I we look at France and they're making like progress. They have their own
Mm-hmm.
struggles too, but the fact that they got abortion in their constitution, like you
Mm-hmm.
can't tell them you can't get an abortion. Like it's in their constitution, which is like
Yeah.
a major success in
Imagine
comparison to
changing
the
the
switch.
Constitution to the US these days.
They're so traditional
Mm-hmm.
that they're like the Constitution can't be changed. Um
As if there aren't, many amendments to the Constitution already.
right. Yeah. So we shall see, but I do think it's possible even now. I just think it's a matter of who takes those stands. There's certain people who leave me a little bit more hopeful, like AOC, like she's not afraid to speak up. Like I like her.
Mm-hmm.
She's a vibe. But then also at the same time in regards to politics and things, there's a traditional structure there that you have to be able
Yeah.
to fight against. But in regards to like technology and stuff, I really don't see how much further we can go. I really could
Yeah.
care less about her. Like I feel like we are is fine. We've already got the touch screens. We've got all this stuff. I don't need to float
I
on
love
air.
to
We already
fly, but I also don't trust self-driving cars. So,
exactly. So that's why I'm like, no, I was like, I don't know about like that. I don't trust self-driving cars either. We've seen them crash a whole bunch of times. If you ever watch Upload, I don't know if you never got a chance to watch it, huh?
not yet.
Okay, but yeah, like that was like, ooh, no, like would you upload your brain to
Oh
like
yeah,
would you
no.
upload your subconscious or they had self-driving cars, homeboy died because his car got into a crash. Just things like that. I don't need all that. I think I'm a little bit more traditional sense of I'm okay with driving my car. But yeah, I don't mind having it have a little touch screen where I could play Spotify and some music, but
Mhm.
I don't need self-driving cars and all that stuff like that. So I am curious to
What
see
about
where we go.
teleportation? Would you
If
go
we
for
could
teleportation?
if we can guarantee safety, I'd be down. I just
Mm,
don't see how that guarantee would happen.
yeah.
I don't know about that. But I think it'd be cool. Teleportation, like a flying car. I would
Mhm.
let them trial run it for about 2 years or so before I hopped in one. But I wouldn't be mad at it. But that seems to be the trajectory of my things. Like I didn't hop into an Uber until a few years. Like when you heard of like, what's this? You're getting in random people's cars? Like that was strange.
Yeah.
And then finally, I hopped into an Uber and now I Uber to work. So just things like that.
Mhm.
Um, but thank you, Nicole, for hopping on, talking about the life of a Zillennial, Millennial, Gen Z. I've like I said, I came to the conclusion that I don't even teach Gen Z. I teach Gen Alpha, which is like, what? um, which is so interesting. But listeners, thank you for listening to the Introvert Social Hour. Share, like, and follow this podcast. Send it to a friend, a family member, a loved one. Please, please, please share. We want to make sure this podcast gets out there and to everybody. Follow me at KaVonna on Instagram and at the Introvert Social Hour on TikTok to get podcast updates so you know what's coming up. Get some sunshine, get some air, have an amazing week. I will see you next week on the Introvert Social Hour. Thanks for joining. Bye.